Number 5. ISS UAP. In 2019, 35-year-old Russian astronaut Ivan Wagner was working aboard the ISS as a first-time crew member, where he and fellow Russian Anatoly Ivanishin are working with Chris Cassidy, the American commander of the expedition. NASA didn't mention Wagner's video in a blog update about the mission and hasn't since, which makes this case a little fishy. Wagner was orbiting the Earth aboard the ISS and might have actually captured footage of potential UFOs, or better known now as UAPs, while recording a video of the aurora lights behind the Earth's beautiful curves. He labeled the video "Space Guests" or "How I Filmed the New Time Lapse." Very cryptic. I mean, he is Russian. Wagner wrote in a tweet featuring the video, which shows the aurora australis passing near Antarctica and Australia. He also tweeted, quote, "However, in the video you will see something else, not only the aurora. The footage shows the curved edge of the Earth at night, with the green swirl of the auroras moving across its surface and several star pinpoints visible in the background." He added that the video was shot in a time lapse, so the brief flash of the lights actually lasted for about 52 seconds straight in real time. Yo, I'm the alien guy, so I'm just gonna say it. Yeah, that's a craft. Like, of course it is. NASA didn't follow up? Like, what are they gonna say? Yeah, that's swamp gas, birds, balloons. Cut the feed! Cut the feed! Like, this is nuts. I get how Starlink and satellites are very organized and look like this, but like, come on. Shot from way up there. Wagner did not claim to see the phenomenon as it happened, of course. Good choice. And no one else aboard the ISS has acknowledged it. Also, good choice. Yeah, I bet they haven't. Like, why would you? You know? He also didn't indicate exactly when the footage was captured, just posted 6:24 a.m. August 19th, 2020. Number 4. The original tapes. Also, dudes, if you like what we do here, just keep creeping you out, you know, Hulk smash that like button. It always helps the channel out, and of course, let me know down below in the comments section what other UAP videos you got for me. You know I love that smoke. Send her over my way. I got some good ones coming up from my vault. What do you think? Are we alone out there, or what? You know my opinion. Especially since I found out the footage our parents and also 650 million people across the globe watched in 1969 was maybe not the original footage. Huh? Yeah, apparently what everyone saw on every television set across the globe wasn't as 4K as it was on NASA's end. A man by the name of Gary George has come across some very, very old tapes that might have been proof of what NASA was seeing. What we saw were a little bit different. Gary George, internship NASA engineer team, he bought surplus government tapes for 218 bucks, discovered originally 3 recordings, labeled Apollo 11 EVA, auctioned at Sotheby's, first generation on the moonwalk. It's even cleaner than what's been seen before. It's like a live HD stream to NASA. Okay, so hold on. NASA had a clearer copy this whole time? Like, I get it, maybe they had a bigger budget, you know, but why did it take so long for these clearer tapes to come out? Like, it's 2019. That's a long time after just accidentally stumble across clear moon landing tapes, no? Like, why was NASA content on only letting us see these grainy, old recorded from a static TV videos when they had these HD B-reels of the moon? I'm thinking so that we can't see what's in the background or what's flying around at them. I don't see a lot of stars in that video. I wonder how long it'll take before Robert Bigelow or Tom DeLonge to get their hands on them, huh? Unfiltered, clean moon tapes. That's gonna cost you. I wonder what else is stuffed in an old box in NASA's basement. I guess we'll find out. Number 3. Lost in space. During the 60s, the space race was on between the Americans and the Russians. A race to be the first to figure out what it is to put something or someone up above the clouds in a little metal box to just go and explore planets. Yeah. Although today we tend to look back at the space race with the Soviet Union as a competition we were destined to win, it was actually the Soviets that secured many of the early victories. American officials at the time weren't only worried about Soviet prestige winning out, they had very real concerns about Soviet space dominating and providing them an ultimate high ground in the next global conflict. While NASA's efforts were widely publicized, but sometimes the Soviets made it a point to never really announce a space mission until days after it was completed. Apparently this allowed them to maintain control over information sharing, oddly only the missions that went well, and maybe not all those failed tests also. The Giudica Cordiglia brothers from Italy were former amateur radio operators who apparently caught some homemade home audio recordings which allegedly proves the Soviet space race covered up some cosmonauts' deaths in the 1960s during trial and error. Yeah. Yeah, that's horrifying. Apparently she's saying, "Help, help, I feel hot." Where? Yes, I can. On the left, I see fire. Am I going to crash? Yo, that's horrifying and also really sad. I mean, NASA and the Soviets both launched animals into space that, sorry to say, spoiler alert, never really came home. Dogs, monkeys, lots of weird stuff happened in the early days of NASA. NASA also hasn't issued a statement since the audio recordings have made waves on the internet, but if the two brothers with an antenna and headphones in a basement can pick that up, what's NASA heard and recorded, huh? Number 2, The Dark Side of the Moon. Yeah, not just an absolute banger of an album by Pink Floyd, but also the most terrifying and mysterious places in our galaxy. The Dark Side of the Moon. NASA apparently does hear some pretty weird stuff in its time. Since its erection in the late 50s, the engineers, computer whizzes, and astronauts have all seen and heard some pretty weird stuff. Yeah, they sign non-disclosures, people. They can't really talk about anything. Buzz Aldrin is the only one who kind of dances on the line of non-disclosure and who gives a shit. You know what I mean? But he's old. So what exactly did the Apollo 10 astronauts hear when they were on the far side of the moon that NASA can't talk about and still can't? I mean, 1969 was a great time for tunes, right? Just hopefully not alien tunes. Despite what you may have heard, it's true that the Apollo 10 astronauts heard strange sounds behind the moon. They described it as outer space type music. But that's a very simple non-alien explanation for what crew members were hearing, and it's been public knowledge since the 70s. In the audio recordings from the Apollo 10 mission, astronaut Gene Cernan, who was piloting the lunar module, asks John Young, who was piloting the command module, if he hears that whistling sound. Cernan calls it music and says it even sounds outer spacey. Finally, Young says, "We're gonna have to find out about that. Nobody will believe us."
Whistling sound? Yeah. Woo! Look at your... Yeah, it sounds like, you know, outer space type music.
Yeah, that's absolutely terrifying. Apparently we were on the other side of the moon for like a whole hour without command being able to hear or communicate to respond. That's terrifying. You wonder why we never hear anything about the other side of the moon, huh? I wonder what's back there. And number 1, Bullseye. NASA's Double Asteroid Redirection Test, or DART, spacecraft has just beamed back the first image of its targets. The mini-moon Dimorphos, as well as its rock formation Titanus body it orbits, the asteroid Didymos. Yeah, I kinda knew about this way back when they kept it low, like really low. Kinda just happened out of nowhere. DART is a planetary defense test mission designed to impact the moonlet to alter its trajectory around Didymos, basically to catch you all up to speed here. If you've seen Armageddon, it's kinda where we're getting with this. The DART mission was launched at 10:20 p.m. on November 23rd, 2021, back during the pandemic. I watched this thing go up without any NASA pre-mission statement and I thought, that can't be good. SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket from the Space Launch Complex 4 at the Vandenberg Space Force Base in California, that's a mouthful, launched this puppy up into space to kind of give the moon a little nudge. Yeah. The spacecraft is scheduled to arrive at its target in late September 2022, and according to NASA officials, which as of yesterday are right on schedule. The spacecraft has now captured the first images of its double target asteroid anomaly, which includes the moonlet it will crash into called Dimorphos, spinning around the asteroid called Didymos. Once it's slammed into Dimorphos, NASA will make observations of the asteroid from Earth to discern whether the spacecraft was able to alter the asteroid's trajectory or not. Yeah, basically, if it does, that means the method can be used to avert potentially hazardous asteroids on a collision course with Earth. If it doesn't, well, we gotta call our alien buddies for a ride, you know? If proven effective, this spacecraft design could potentially be scaled up to deflect an Earth-bound asteroid. The spacecraft is still 20 million miles away from the asteroids at the point of this picture, so they appear a little indistinguishable. Looks like a little star. NASA will live stream the impact event later this month, apparently. Hopefully with some 4K live NASA, not this grainy film stuff we're used to seeing. The space agency announced live coverage of the DART impact would begin at 6 p.m. on September 26th. It will air live on NASA TV. Hey, I've seen Armageddon. I know what's up. I'm sorry, AJ. You go take care of my little girl. Gets me every time. It's a great movie, great movie. Number 5, Space Camp. Starting this list off, we arrive at the Apollo 8 mission. Well, 7 other missions before it, but it was a little rocky back then, you know? The early days. But Apollo 8 was the first fully crewed spacecraft to leave low Earth orbit and the first human spaceflight to reach the moon. Frank Borman, Jim Lovell, and Bill Anders, aka the crew, orbited the moon 10 times without landing. December 21st, 1968. The Apollo 8 astronauts returned to Earth on December 27th, 1968. Now, here's the scary part. Apparently, while they were up there, they claimed to have seen some pretty strange stuff. Some weird lights, glowing moving balls, and apparently bonfires all over the moon. What? Yeah, apparently the men said it looked like smoke and small bonfires when visiting the far side of the moon. When the capsule passed behind the moon for 45 minutes, the crew claimed to have seen multiple lights coming from the surface. And thankfully, NASA even transcribed what they heard. Borman says, bonfires. Anders says campfires. All in all, we have astronauts puzzled at what they're seeing. 7 months later, Apollo 11 is performing a mission orbiting the moon and captures apparently a bunch of things that are out of the ordinary. Buzz and Collins both claim to have seen things like lava flowing, aliens parked on craters, to even small bonfires and flickers on the surface. Of course, there's no oxygen on the moon, so what could have caused the fire and the smoke? Number 4, air buds. As always, dudes, if you dig what we do here on Top 5 Scary, hit that thumbs up button or leave a comment down below. It really helps us out. What's the biggest NASA secret you know of? Let me know down below. I'll check it out. When we think about astronauts that have spent their fair share up in space, we can't forget the experiments in the early stages of both the Soviets and the American space programs. It truly was a race, pushing the limits faster and faster, bigger and bolder kind of stuff, and with that omelet comes a couple broken eggs. We often forget that NASA has sent its fair share of animals up there as well, and of course, unfortunately, not many of them have returned back to us. Yeah, very sad. Science is one of those things where its benefits are tremendous, but the hypothesis parts sometimes are a little dark and grim. We remember Laika, the space dog, and her 103-minute cosmic journey aboard Sputnik 2, but let's not forget the infamous Able and Baker. This was the American version of Laika, only a year later too. 1959, the United States launched one female rhesus monkey named Able and one female squirrel monkey named Baker into space. This mission lasted only 15 minutes and they both safely returned back home. Their predecessors, not so lucky. See, a couple of animals have yet to return from their space mission. Mice, geckos, dogs. It was a different time. To announce their successful flight, NASA unveiled Able and Baker to journalists in the same room where just a month prior they had introduced the Mercury 7 crew as the country's first human astronauts. Big jumps, right? Sadly, after the training and missions, both animals passed. But you can visit them at the Smithsonian National Air and Space Museum where they're both on display. A little dark and grim, but we pay homage. Number 3. Valkyrie. NASA has been experimenting with a little bit more tech in the last 20 years. A little bit more robotics instead of fitting humans into a capsule. Seems like this next project has been in the works for some years, but under silent lock and key until recent years. Valkyrie is the name of the NASA's new semi-secretive AI project. Taken from Norse mythology, Valkyrie is designed to be a robust, rugged, and entirely electric humanoid robot capable of operating in degraded or damaged human-engineered environments. The NASA R5, aka Valkyrie, is the size of a full human adult with a 7-digit price tag, putting it a little bit more expensive than the very terrestrial Tesla bot. This robot was originally built for the 2013 DARPA Robotics Challenge. The 6-foot, 300-pound piece of machinery represents the future of space exploration. It's the first step towards a goal of human colonization on Mars and other planets in our solar system. Dude, this is nuts! High hopes for the robot. However, currently tethered to the ceiling of a warehouse in Lowell, Massachusetts. Oh. The Lowell model is one of 4 units produced by NASA. The space agency held on to one robot for its own purposes and awarded 2 to the research of Northwestern and MIT, while the 4th lives in Scotland's University of Edinburgh. The 4 models are being tinkered and tailored on as we speak. Long story short, we've reached a peak in space travel where maybe living things don't have to make it or break it anymore. To reduce hazards and prevent any more life being lost or altered for science, the Valkyrie is an option for NASA to search very hazardous environments while keeping a pretty safe distance while doing so. Number 2. Ice cold. We all know about Jupiter's moon Europa. I was like 18 when I found out about all the planets' moons in our solar system. Yeah. Did you know that Jupiter has 79 moons? Like 79. Yeah, we have 1. Like, we know nothing, Jon Snow. Well, maybe we know something, because apparently we found traces of water on a couple different rocks now. Europa, the 6th largest moon in our solar system. It was discovered in 1610, and ever since then, we've kind of wondered what's on it. In 1979, the 2 Voyager spacecrafts passed through the Jovian system, providing the first hints that Europa may contain liquid water. The ground-based telescopes on Earth, along with the Galileo spacecraft and telescopes, have increased scientists' confidence for a European ocean. Yeah, cue NASA's Sesame program. Scientific exploration subsurface access mechanism for Europa. Sesame will not drill, however, but actually thaw its way under the icy ocean, and from there will operate small probes to conduct an array of research on biology, sediment, gases, and of course what we're all hoping for, humanoid mermaid-looking aliens. However, the part that really has NASA's attention is all of the tectonic activity beneath said icy shelf, meaning that somewhere in the middle, there's warm water flowing under with currents. Yeah, creepy. In 2011, NASA awarded Stone Aerospace $4 million to fund Phase 2 of Project Sesame. Phase 2 of the project consisted of testing the cryobot in Alaska in 2015. Phase 3 of the project will use a swarm of tiny robots the size of cell phones to whisk through the water beneath the thick icy shelf of Jupiter's moon, looking for evidence of alien life. The tiny robots would be released underwater, swimming far from their mothership to explore a new world. Basically, the cryobot melts its way through the subglacial lake, collects samples, resurfaces, and comes back home. Yeah, seems like an alien movie plot just ready for scripting, huh? And number 1, Artemis 1. So we haven't been back to the moon since 1972, but why? Well folks, we're going back, and soon, like 2 weeks soon. Yeah, I didn't know either, as I'm a millennial who doesn't watch the news on TV. We're going back to the moon, people, but not the Apollo program anymore. No, we've changed the name to another Greek name. They're twin, Artemis. Apparently, Artemis 1 will be the first in a series of increasingly complex missions to build a long-term human presence on the moon for decades to come. Oh yeah, we're staying. Like building forts and stuff. The primary goals for Artemis 1 are to demonstrate Orion systems in a spaceflight environment and to ensure a safe re-entry, descent, splashdown, and recovery. Basically like the full shebang. Yeah, not taking any more risks, huh NASA? Safety first kind of deal. I like it. Not a long mission too. September 27th they're supposed to launch and splash back down here in November. Like 38 days long. Nice little quick one. And then reevaluate and select the people. Yeah, dude, this is sick. I'm down with Phase 2 space stuff, you know? Like, let's get that robot up there.
Number 5 on this list is the Fermi paradox. This one is all about aliens, but maybe not how you might expect. Science Focus says, in 1950, Enrico Fermi, the man who built the first nuclear reactor, was having lunch in the canteen of the Los Alamos bomb lab in New Mexico when he suddenly said, "Where is everybody?" Everyone around the table knew exactly what he meant. Decades later, Fermi's question was examined independently by the American physicists Michael Hart and Frank Tipler. Hart considered aliens spreading throughout our Milky Way, and Tipler considered self-replicating machines that, on arrival at a planetary system, exploit the resources to build 2 copies of themselves that continue voyaging. Both concluded that even at modest speeds of travel, every star in the galaxy would be visited in a fraction of the age of the Milky Way. As Fermi realized, the aliens should be here on Earth. They do not appear to be, though. This became the Fermi paradox. Hundreds of explanations have been proposed. They include the ideas that we are the first intelligence to arise in the galaxy and so are totally alone, and that we are a nursery world off limits to advanced civilizations that might adversely affect our development. A more mundane possibility is that there is no paradox because any signs of visitation in the distant past would be erased by wind, rain, and geological processes. Recently, however, a team led by Dr. Jonathan Carroll Nellenbach of the University of Rochester, New York, has proposed that our sun may simply have been bypassed by a wave of extraterrestrial expansion. So why are aliens not here? Have they already been here and we didn't even know? Or did they just bypass our solar system altogether? Or is all of this nonsense and the universe is just so big that they haven't gotten to us yet? It's certainly something interesting to think about. Considering the universe is infinite and there are so many places and planets we don't know about, it seems ridiculous to think that we're the only intelligent life or the first intelligent life in everything. Like, that's as if we hit the biggest lottery ever. Comment down below what you think about this alien question and why aren't they here yet? Number 4 on this list is dark matter. You've definitely heard the term dark matter get thrown around a bunch before, and you've probably wondered, what the heck is it? Well, if that sounds like you, then you aren't alone. Scientists all across the globe are still wondering what dark matter is and the purpose that it serves. Science Focus says dark matter gives out no light or too little light for us to detect. We know it exists because we see the effect of its gravity on the visible stars and galaxies. For instance, the Milky Way could not have dragged in enough matter to make its stars in the 13.82 billion years since the Big Bang without there being a lot of invisible matter whose extra gravity speeded things up. The European Space Agency's Planck satellite found that dark matter accounts for 26.8% of the mass energy of the universe compared with the 4.3% of normal atomic energy. It therefore outweighs the visible stars and galaxies by a factor of 6. Puzzlingly, no Earth-based experiment has found any evidence of dark matter despite decades of searching. It is conceivable that it's not our theory of matter that needs modification, but our theory of gravity. Or that dark matter is not a fluid made of a single particle, but is complex like the atomic matter we see around us. Maybe the universe is filled with dark stars and dark planets and dark life. There is an entire universe of dark matter that we don't even know about. Like, what the heck is this stuff and what's it composed of? Why can't our eyes see it? Why doesn't something this dense even show up? It's all very confusing and nobody can figure it out right now. Dark matter is one of the biggest mysteries in the universe, and understanding what it is and how it works could completely change our understanding of gravity and matter as a whole. Hopefully NASA can get a grasp on it soon and the mystery can finally be solved. Number 3 on this list is the central black hole. At the center of almost every single known galaxy in the universe, which there are about 2 trillion of, there is a huge black hole just chilling in the middle. These aren't your everyday typical black holes though, they are gargantuan in size and weight. Some of these beasts weigh around 50 billion times that of our sun. Just an absolutely insane number that our brains truly can't really comprehend. But how did this absolute unit of a black hole get there, and why is it so big? Well, NASA doesn't really know, and they are desperately trying to find out. Black holes are one of the most interesting things in our universe, and one of the things that we know very little about. The question of where does a black hole actually go to will probably never be answered because we'll never be able to go inside without getting completely crushed into oblivion. But figuring out why they're in the middle of pretty much every notable galaxy is important. If we can understand this, then we can understand how a galaxy is formed and potentially the lifespan of certain galaxies. Also, knowing what creates these black holes will help us better understand them and see if our planet will ever be at risk of such a disaster. Granted, maybe ignorance is bliss in this case, because even if we knew a black hole was coming, there's really nothing that we'd be able to do about it. Number 2 on this list is dark energy. For a long time, the only force that was thought to be operating on the entire universe was gravity. This was everywhere in the universe and decided pretty much how things played out. Gravity is not alone anymore though, or at least since the discovery of dark energy. Dark energy is this invisible force that is everywhere in the universe and is partially responsible for speeding up the expansion of said universe. Apparently this energy overtook gravity 5 billion years ago as the dominant force that's expanding the universe, and that's why it's happening in the first place. The thing is, we have no idea what this dark energy is or why it's here. Similar to dark matter, it feels like this has just appeared, and because we can't see it or have no idea of its origin, we have no idea how much weight it really has on us and our current laws of physics. Apparently 2/3 of the energy mass of the universe is made up of this stuff, and we have no idea about it. That's kind of scary if you think about it, and it puts in perspective how little we know about things. Oftentimes, I think we fall into a trap assuming that our species is far more advanced than it actually is, but when you consider that we have no idea where 2/3 of the energy mass in our universe came from, or what it is, It really brings you back to reality. I feel like this might be one of the hardest mysteries on this list to solve, and it's gonna take a while. And number 1 on this list is the multiverse. What seems to be the staple of a plotline of any good sci-fi movie these days is the multiverse, something that we truly know nothing about. The theory is basically that there is an infinite number of universes with an infinite number of possibilities and outcomes, and it's all just freaking infinite and honestly kinda hurts my brain to think about for very long. But is there any substance to this theory? How will we be able to know if it's true or not, and what would that mean for us? So the multiverse theory all comes from another theory called inflation theory. Inflation theory is the thinking that in basically a second, when our universe was just a baby, everything started inflating and growing super fast, expanding outwards in all directions. Now, it's thought that the inflation of our universe stopped 14 billion years ago, but that when our universe stopped, the beginning of another started, and so on and so forth. It's very complicated, and in all honesty, I don't really understand all of it, but that's the bare bones. There's also the thinking that because life is so hard to support, as in you need so many things to go right in the universe, it seems extremely unlikely that if there is only one universe, life would have actually formed. If there were multiple or infinite universes, there would be enough chances though that one or more are bound to have the necessary things to create life. Either way, if this is true, then it obviously changes a lot of things about how we view our universe and the role we play in it. Maybe there's another version of you just chilling in a totally alternate universe right now, except instead of hands you have wings or something. A little ridiculous, I know, but if universes are infinite, then you never know.
Number 5. With the James Webb Telescope, NASA has found a way to be able to peer back into time, literally, and look deeper into the cosmos than ever before. The speed of light is 300,000 kilometers a second, meaning that it takes about 8 minutes for light from the sun to hit Earth, meaning the rays of the sun are not real time, but rather already 8 minutes old when you see it. So using that same thinking, most stars are light years and light years away. And for those at home, a light year is 9.46 trillion kilometers. So really, hop, skip, and a jump away. The James Webb Telescope is able to see so deeply into space that it's able to see light emitted from stars 13.5 billion years ago, after the dawn of the Big Bang. So in a sense, we can travel through time and are able to see light from the advent of the universe. It's not quite the TARDIS hurtling through the galaxy, but it is an unimaginable achievement, and one that will be surpassed sooner than we think. If you're liking what we're doing here at Top 5 Scary, why not toss a little subscribe our way? And I promise the rest of the ones on this list will be time travel. I just wanted to slip one little educational thing in there for you. Number 4. The Chronovisor. One of the most secretive places in the world is undoubtedly the Vatican's archives. It's been said that it's one of the most secure buildings on the planet, so if you're planning an Ocean's 11 kind of deal, think again. We can only speculate what sort of things they have locked away in there, but it has been said that they have technologies we could not believe in there. Like, the Chronovisor. According to French priest and paranormal investigator Francois Brun, the Chronovisor was a device that allowed members of the Vatican to see into the past. Brun claims that the Chronovisor was first built in the 50s by a scientist and priest, Father Pellegrino Maria Ernetti, along with a council of scientists working in secret around the clock. Brun's description of the seemingly magic device was that it was a large cabinet made of unknown metals connected with a series of levers and buttons. Apparently, it could be programmed to see any date in the past. From Brun's accounts, Ernetti used it to see all sorts of wondrous things, from a speech given by Napoleon Bonaparte, watching the crucifixion, and recovering fragments of a lost ancient tragedy play called Thyestes to transcribe to the modern day. Now, obviously, there's going to be some skepticism as to whether or not the Chronovisor exists or ever existed at all. I mean, it's a pretty bold claim. A photo that Ernetti claimed was a real-life photo of the crucifixion later turned out to be nothing more than just an edited wood carving. Unfortunately, we may never know the truth behind the Chronovisor since the doors to the Vatican's vault are locked very, very, very tightly. Number 3. Gateway Experience. The CIA was fascinated with harnessing psychic ability. This is very well documented, with several projects being released to the public about this sort of thing. To simplify it as much as I possibly can, the project was centered around using a combination of hypnosis and finely tuned audio to create an altered state of consciousness. The thinking was that through binaural beats, the output of the left and right hemispheres of the brain would sync up and make you more psychic good, I guess. The summation from one of the researchers is that a human brain operating normally is kind of like a lamp. But when both hemispheres are in sync, this light turns into a laser, reaching farther and more effective than before. The goal was to expand the human consciousness and have it reach outside the body, being able to astrally project yourself back in time. Test subjects would meditate in a mantra saying, "I am just a physical body, and I deeply desire to expand my consciousness." While listening to this hypnotic audio, putting their body into a sleep state, the subjects were told to visualize time as a wheel with spokes that point to events in their past, and just find a way to transport their consciousness back to those moments. In the early tests, less than 5% of the subjects were able to achieve this, but the team believed that with years of practice they'd be able to harness this ability better. The final stage of the learning and experience was an out-of-body movement, where the subject would be able to lift their consciousness out of the body entirely and harmoniously interact with the environment. However, unfortunately, no one in the project was able to reach this stage just yet. Number 2. In 2019, Reddit user Flard posted a story captioned, "Time travel is not what you think it's like." In the post, the user named Clark details the experience he had in college at Georgia State University when he was approached by someone scouting for a clinical trial dubbed Project BTAOW33. A little disappointing that it doesn't have a super cool name like Project Majestic or Project ZK47 or something, but okay. Going along, the researchers promised to pay for Clark's tuition in exchange for participating in a clinical trial. Clark met with the researchers and was taken to a small nondescript house in the Georgian mountain woods, wherein laid a silver metal house with a ring surrounding it, which the crew insisted the test subjects avoid coming into any contact with. Clark continues and says that there were only 2 other people participating in the trial with him, 2 other students of a similar age, a young man and a young woman. The 3 of them were ushered into the home and introduced to the experiment. The doctors told them they would be launching 3 hours into the future, and the entire house would be transported, and in 3 hours they would reapparate. The doctors reassured them that it would be completely safe, as they'd practiced on rats and dogs, although they didn't know what it would feel like. After a brief explanation, the doctors drove off to their control site to begin the experiment. And here's where it gets weird. Clark claims that outside became dark instantly. And not just dark, like black, like the abyss, like an unmoving void. In the post, he describes it as like being between dreams. He claims from here that the 3 test subjects began to panic, shaking around the room, desperately trying to see something outside or escape this house that they've been locked in. Clark claims that he has no idea how long he was stuck inside that building, saying it could have been anywhere from minutes to hours to even days. One of the subjects attempted to escape, and he said he was lost to the void entirely. So what happened? Well, Clark claims that after an extended period of stasis in this void, they did appear 3 hours later in time, just like they had claimed. And that after being returned home, he'd never heard from the researchers or the project again. Number 1. The Philadelphia experiment was a US military experiment performed sometime around October 1943. The USS Eldridge was the center of these top secret Black Ops level tests. Officially, the project was to prototype advanced cloaking technology, with the intention being able to render an entire warship invisible. Think like what the Predator does, but for a battleship. Well, that would already be unnerving enough. Legend has it that the story runs deeper than that, and that the cloaking, ironically, was a cover for the true reason behind the trial, which was experimenting with time travel. Witnesses of the experiment claim that they saw the USS Eldridge disappear into a cloud of green smoke surrounding the ship, where it then vanished, before reappearing after a few seconds. Reports from the crew are horrifying to say the least, where they claim that they were affected in various disturbing ways. Crew complaining of intense headaches, nausea, some claiming they suffered mental issues after the trial. Others developed mysterious illness. Scariest of all, though, is the claims that some crew members had fused to the ship itself, skin and limbs fused to the bulkhead. One crew member in particular, Al Bielek, claims to have first-hand experience with the Eldritch, where he insists the experiment was a success, and when the Eldritch vanished, it reappeared in the year 2137. Bielek made a litany of claims about his visions of the future, claiming he saw a utopian vision of the future where the world was run on an AI that had eliminated all of the world's problems and conflicts. Officially, the US government has outright denied everything regarding the Philadelphia experiment and has ignored all of Bielek's claims altogether. But of course they would, okay? They're not gonna throw their hands up, lay their cards on the table, and be like, oh yeah, we've got time travel, we've been traveling time since the 40s, we've been experimenting with it ever since, you caught us. No! No, they're gonna keep it under wraps until they're ready, and they'll probably reveal it about 40 years ago.
Number 5. Al Worden. American test pilot, engineer, and NASA astronaut Alfred Merrill Worden was the module pilot for the Apollo 15 lunar mission in 1971. One of the 24 people who have flown to the moon. Woohoo! He's got a couple of firsts though. He orbited it 74 times in the command module. He was the first to drive a moon car. After Apollo 15 reached lunar orbit and his crewmates departed, and Worden spent 3 days alone in his module. That's terrifying. Traveling the furthest out from any other human. After he returned, the crew and him became involved in a NASA controversy, however. Not over leaked alien info, but over postage stamps they had taken to the moon. Yeah, big no-no apparently. They were reprimanded by NASA and did not fly in space again. Worden remained at NASA until 1975, then entered a private sector. And then it gets weird. On a British television morning show, Al Worden started talking about some interesting stuff. They asked him, "Why should we keep going back to the moon?" He paused and replied, "Survival. Survival of our species." Worden also rejected the notion that humans could colonize planets within our solar system, calling them unsustainable. Then he claims he knows where to find habitable planets. When pressed on aliens if he believes them or not, he said, "Yes. You know, I've been asked that question hundreds of times. Yeah, we are the aliens though. We just think there's somebody else. But we were the ones who came from somewhere else because somebody else had to survive. They got in their little spaceship and they came here and they landed and they started civilization here. And if you don't believe me, go get books on the ancient Sumerians and see what they have to say about it. They'll tell you right up front." End quote. Okay, when you hear an astronaut say that, kinda jarring. Number 4. Roswell. As always, if you dig what we do here on Top 5 Scary, make sure you hit that like button. Birth of the UAP phenomenon. 1945. The US's first nuclear explosion. 1946. First underwater nuclear explosion. 1947, the first crash flying saucer. Coincidence? I think not. Especially since they've been known to hover around nuclear bases. Probably for the better. Humans are kind of the worst. Local rancher Mac Brazel finds the wreckage on his property in Lincoln County, New Mexico. Sheriff Wilcox shows RAAF's commanding officer Colonel Blanchard the materials, and during the night, the Air Force combs the entirety of the property, apparently harboring 2 small injured alien bodies. Taking them, of course, to Kirtland Air Force Base, New Mexico that night. And the very next morning, the Roswell Air Force makes a statement claiming they have recovered a crashed flying disc in local newspapers. Boom! History, baby! Photographs of Jesse Marcel, the head intelligence officer who investigated and recovered some of the debris. The very next day, the Army retracts their statement and all of a sudden, a high-altitude weather balloon. Can you believe that, huh? AKA the birth of a conspiracy theory. Nuclear fission explosions, weather balloons. Something's not adding up here. Number 3. Edgar Mitchell. Edgar Dean Mitchell was a US Navy officer, aviator, test pilot, engineer, NASA astronaut, and of course, a ufologist. Ufology is the pseudo term for somebody who studies the UFO phenomenon. I don't think there's a degree you can get that in. If so, I'm signing up. What school? What school, sorry? He was the lunar module pilot of the Apollo 14 in 1971 and spent 9 hours working on the lunar surface. He was the 6th person to walk on the moon. Yeah, he was walking while Worden was up there drifting in the currents of space. Mitchell publicly expressed his opinions and that he was sure that there were thousands of UFOs recorded since the early 1940s belonging to other planets. Thousands. Dateline NBC conducted an interview with Mitchell in 1996. He talked about meeting with officials from 3 different countries who claimed that they had met extraterrestrials in person. Quote, "The evidence for alien contact was very strong and classified by governments, who were covering up visitations and existence of alien bodies in places such as Roswell, New Mexico." Mitchell's book, The Way of the Explorer, discusses his journey. In 2004, he told the St. Petersburg Times that the US government was studying alien bodies and that this group had specifically stopped briefing US presidents since the 1960s. He said, quote, "We all know that UFOs are real. Now, the question is, where do they come from?" In 2008, Mitchell then was interviewed and claimed that Roswell crash was in fact the aliens that had contacted humans several times, but that the government had hidden the truth for more than 60 years. Scary stuff, scary stuff. He sadly passed in 2016. If we just reread the credentials alone, just one more time. Number 2, James McDivitt. James Alton McDivitt is an American test pilot, Air Force pilot, engineer, and NASA astronaut who flew in both the Gemini and Apollo programs. After graduating first in his class with a Bachelor of Science degree in Aeronautical Engineering, he qualified as a test pilot at the Air Force. In 1962, McDivitt was selected by NASA for the Gemini 4 mission. In 1965, he saw, filmed, and photographed an object which approached the Gemini 4 as they were orbiting Earth. Over Hawaii, a craft of some sort. The UFO had a long arm sticking out of it. Here's what Major James McDivitt said. "I was flying with Ed White. He was sleeping at the time, so I don't have anybody to verify this story, but we were drifting in space when suddenly an object appeared in the window. It's a cylindrical object, white. It had a long arm that stuck out of the side. The film was sent back to NASA and reviewed by some NASA film technicians. One of them selected what he thought was what they were talking about, at least before I had the chance to review it, and it was not the picture. It was a picture of a sun reflection on the window. So what were the pictures that he was talking about?" In 1975, McDivitt said, "I never made a big deal out of it. It was something I definitely couldn't identify. It looked like a beer can with a pencil sticking out of it. Yeah, I would eventually give up on that too if those were my credentials and people were like, yeah, right, James." When somebody has like 25 years of designing and flying space shuttles around, when they say, "Hey guys, I'm seeing something up here," it's not like, "Oh, James, clean those old specs, would you? Yuck, yuck." Houston, we have a problem. And number 1, Gordon Cooper. Leroy Gordon Cooper Jr., an American aerospace engineer, test pilot, US Air Force pilot, and the youngest of the 7 original astronauts in Project Mercury, the first human space program in the United States. You know the pictures. It looks like they're wearing a tinfoil suit, you know? Old school, old school. After service as a fighter pilot in World War II, he qualified as a test pilot in 1956 and then was selected as an astronaut in 1959. In 1963, Cooper piloted the longest and last Mercury spaceflight, Mercury Atlas 9. 34 hours in space. The first American to spend an entire day in space, the first person to sleep in space, and the last American launched on a solo orbit mission. In Cooper's autobiography, Leap of Faith, co-authored by Bruce Henderson, he recounted his experiences with the Air Force and NASA and an alleged UFO conspiracy. Cooper claimed to have seen his first UFO while flying over Germany, then saw them land in a dry lake bed. Cooper claimed up until his death that the US was indeed covering up UFOs. He said that there were hundreds of reports made by his fellow pilots, many coming from the military pilots on radar. In his memoirs, Cooper wrote that he had seen unexplained aircrafts tons in his career, and that in 1978 he actually testified before the United Nations on the topic. He sadly passed in 2004. He was such a strong advocate for disclosure, and all of these astronauts are remembered as putting their neck and name out on the line for some truth. But I mean, those UFO enthusiasts, huh? They're all wackos, right? Right?
Number 5. They say in space, no one can hear you scream. But what about a knocking? China's first man in space, Yang Liwei, might be able to tell you what the sound of a man screaming in space sounds like. The taikonaut, the term for an astronaut from China's space program, first visited the stars on a maiden voyage in 2003. While up there, soaring the cosmos, Liwei reported hearing something knocking on the spaceship's hull. He said it didn't sound like it was coming from inside the ship, but it didn't sound like it was coming from the outside of it either. Now, normally, you're not really supposed to hear, anything in space, so this was out of the norm. Liwei went to peer out the porthole just to confirm that there were no goblins or gremlins hanging on the outside of the hull ripping up nuts and bolts, and says he didn't see anything of any note outside causing the sound, which he claims sounded like someone banging on an iron bucket with a hammer. Now where it gets really interesting is that other taikonauts on the Shenzhou 6 and 7 spacecrafts in 2005 and 2008 both reported hearing the exact same phenomenon. One could be a coincidence, one can be explained off. But 3 separate occurrences of hearing something knocking on the ship's hull? Could it be something related to the shuttle's construction? Or is there something haunting the Shenzhou spacecrafts? Wait. Do you hear that? That knocking? It sounds like a transmission coming from inside the studio. Something, a voice telling me that you should subscribe to Top 5 Scary Videos for the best scary videos on the web. It's strange. I don't know what it means. Sorry, let's move on. Number 4. Now we know space is silent. I'd say no one can hear you scream, but I literally just used the alien joke on the last point, and I've hit my quota for 80s movies references already, and we're not even halfway through the list. I think the silence of the stars would drive me absolutely nutty. I don't know how I'd handle the quiet. I need something in my ears. In 1969, a triumvirate of 3 astronauts claimed they heard something pierce the silence. Apollo 10 astronauts Tom Stafford, Gene Cernan, and John Young while on the surface of the moon, were photographing craters, making memories, that sort of thing, when all three of them unanimously claimed they had heard something ethereal on their headsets, claiming that they had heard a sound that was strange, melodic, and composed and otherworldly. All of them described it as music. Now, it's worth noting that it was 1969, so there was no chance that someone accidentally had just left an Aphex Twin album inside the ship's CD player. Commander Cernan said at the time, "We're gonna have to find out about this, because no one is going to believe us. Don't worry. Just like the Ghostbusters, we're ready to believe you." And look at that, I snuck in another 80s movie reference without you even noticing. So what exactly was the crew listening to? Could it have just been something malfunctioning on the ship? Feedback from some equipment somewhere? Or could it have been some extraterrestrial entity trying to contact them, or getting caught on the airwaves? Now, some speculate radio interference, but not everyone buys the official story, and NASA has never given an official answer. The biggest question remains though is, what does space music sound like? If I had to guess, I'd say probably like Grimes' music. I think that's what moon men are listening to. Number 3. When you think of an alien, what do you picture? A little gray thing with big black eyes peering out at you from a flying saucer? Maybe a regular looking man with pointy ears and a strong brow? Maybe a noble warrior with a cool energy sword? Point is, you probably picture something a bit bipedal because of sci-fi depictions, but it doesn't have to be that way. What about a snake? Space snakes. Why does it have to be space snakes? Dr. Story Musgrave has 6 degrees as a physician, former astronaut, and consultant for the Imagineers at Disneyland. Dr. Story Musgrave sounds like a completely fake man who has one of the coolest names ever, but he is very real, and he has one of the most impressive resumes on the planet. He can also boast that he's been to space on 6 separate occasions and has seen things you wouldn't believe. In a 1994 interview, Musgrave spoke out about coming into contact with something he believes to be extraterrestrial. He said, "I've seen a snake out there, 6-7 feet long. It's rubbery and it follows you for a rather long period of time. The more you fly in space, the more you see an incredible amount of living things out there. And that sort of thing brings to you a certainty that other living creatures are out there." Now, skeptics have dismissed this, of course, saying Musgrave just saw a hose or a loose bit of debris or something, but Musgrave insists that the entity he saw had its own method of propulsion and was following him around directly. He said he saw this creature on 2 separate occasions. Maybe it remembered him. Obviously, Musgrave is considered to be fairly reputable as far as NASA astronauts go, and I mean, if Disney trusts him, he must be pretty reputable. So it seems unlikely that he would tell a tall tale. When asked directly what he thought he saw up there, Musgrave said, "Living creatures far more developed as civilizations. They've been around for 100 million years, and we can't even conceive how advanced they are and the kind of things they're doing. That's why I make an effort to communicate. And I might be considered eccentric because I do, but I do tell them to come and get me." And you know what? Thank you, Musgrave. I'm glad someone is willing to be the spokesperson for aliens. Maybe offer them a ticket to Space Mountain. They might feel right at home at that. Or they might be very offended, I'm not sure. Number 2. Many who go to space see bizarre things that they can't explain. And yet many space travelers don't speak out about what they see, for fear of reprimandation, of being deemed nothing more than a tinfoil hat wearing loon. Russian cosmonaut Major General Vladimir Kovalyonok said on the matter, "Many cosmonauts have seen phenomena which are far beyond the experiences of Earthmen. For 10 years, I never spoke on such things." Well, let's take a listen to his story. In 1981, while orbiting outside of the Salyut station, Major Kovalyonok was exercising when he saw something traveling outside the station alongside the porthole. He claims he saw something outside the porthole that was an object he could not explain. He said it was something floating that looked a bit like a barbell, except it was transparent, and it looked like it had something inside of it. He said he saw gas discharging out of it, like it was reacting. He insists that whatever he saw wasn't artificial, and that it moved in a way that suggested life. He said he saw it tightening and pulsating like an organ. He described the entity as being impossible within the laws of physics. As he was observing it, it combusted spontaneously in an incandescent ray of golden light. Seconds later, a golden explosion followed behind it, and 2 spheres of golden light appeared, which Kovalyonok described as beautiful. After the explosions, there was a white smoke and a cloud-like sphere, and as the station orbited around Earth's shadow, the spheres never returned. Unlike a lot of his peers, Kovalyonok was very willing to speak out on his experience about what he saw. There was a small investigation into the possibility that it could have been a missile test or a weapons test of some kind, but no conclusive answers were ever found. Whatever he saw, we may never get the truth. And to my Russian viewers, I am so sorry for that pronunciation. Number 1. Major Gordon Cooper is an American astronaut of some renown. The first astronaut to spend a full 24 hours in space, and the last American to spend a fully solo orbital mission. A renowned, reputable astronaut, he's very insistent about life beyond the stars. Near the end of a 22-hour trip around the planet in 1963, he claims that while ending orbit and returning home, he saw a glowing green ethereal orb following him approaching his capsule. The entity was even picked up by a tracking radar in Australia. And yet bizarrely, when he landed, reporters from NBC told him that they were barred from questioning him about the sighting and experience at all. This wouldn't even be Cooper's first experience with UFOs. In 1951, while on an Air Force mission flying over Western Germany, Cooper claimed to have seen metallic saucers flying in ways that would outmaneuver any American spacecraft. He said, "I believe these extraterrestrials and their crews are visiting this planet. Most astronauts are reluctant to discuss UFOs." Listen to this other quote from Cooper. "In the USA, every day our radar instruments capture objects of form and composition unknown to us. And there are thousands of witness reports and a quantity of documents to prove this. But nobody wants to make them public. Why? Because authority is afraid that people may think of God knows what kind of horrible invaders. We have to avoid panic by all means." Now, it sounds like Cooper is alluding to a cover-up. Gordon Cooper isn't just some nut on the street barking out to whoever will listen, but a respected, experienced sailor of the stars. So is this why most stories of UFOs get buried? And astronauts who speak out about it are all labeled as sensationalists? All because NASA thinks that people can't handle it? I think we're ready. I think the stories are starting to come out there. The truth is out there. And we will find it.
Number 5. Leland Melvin. American engineer and now retired NASA astronaut Leland Melvin has spent hundreds of hours in space. Literally hundreds. Leland holds 4 honorary doctorates for his service in education, the sciences, and philanthropy. Doctorates. I'm just saying that before the comments start rolling in saying he's just another wacko. He's crazy. They're not wackos, people. Any of them. They've been screened so many times by so many people with so many tests, they have to be damn well near perfect before going up on or in NASA's budget. Before his career with NASA, Leland was actually All-American for football. Detroit Lions, Toronto Argos. Guy made the NFL and then said, "You know what? I think I'm gonna be an astronaut." Like, give this guy a Netflix movie, would ya? He was selected by NASA in 1998 after getting injured with a football career. Guy goes from the turf to working at NASA Langley Center. This guy's put in time, both down here and up there. Mission after mission with NASA. He's got quite the practice at the whole floating around thing. When Leland was pressed about otherworldly visitors and his ideas about the cosmos, he said this when he was working up in orbit. He had seen something translucent, curved and organic looking when he was working with fellow astronaut Randy Bresnik. The pair of them, again, called down to NASA to ask what it could be. NASA's official response was, probably ice. Yeah, nice and specific there, Houston. Thank you for that. When has NASA ever said probably? Melvin dismissed this and figured it was NASA's explanation to just cover it up. Like, who's more qualified here? That's all I'm asking. When the most qualified people are like, yeah, I can't tell if that's frozen water or a full-on mothership, Houston. Either they shouldn't be up there at all, or we need some more Windex on those windows there, NASA. Huh? Number 4, Ivan Wagner. As always, if you dig what we do here at Top 5 Scary, make sure you hit that like button or comment down below. It really helps the channel out. Have you ever seen a UFO out there? Yeah, you. Have you seen one? Comment down below with some details about your experiences. I know I have. Twice now. Hence the obsession with all this stuff. Those Reddit rabbit holes, boy oh boy. Speaking of falling into a wormhole of conspiracy and who said what, astronaut Ivan Wagner, or I should say cosmonaut Ivan Wagner, since he's Russian by birth, and although he's bunking up with some roomies up there in the ISS, he was on the ISS as a first-timer just back in 2020. Does NASA initiate rookies up there? Like pull pranks on the newbies? Like no gravity, just unbuckle you while you sleep, flow you out, you know? He and fellow Russian Anatoly Ivanishin were working up there alongside Chris Cassidy, the American commander of said expedition. When Wagner was orbiting the Earth, he might have captured some footage of UFOs, better known as UAPs, unidentified aerial phenomena. the jargon nowadays. The aurora lights behind Earth's beautiful curves was being recorded from the ISS when he saw a string of really weird lights moving in a really weird way. He labeled the video Space Guests. Wagner tweeted the vid, which apparently shows the aurora australis near Antarctica, and then all of a sudden this blob of organized lights just cruises on over the globe. Looks like a blob of like glitter just trucking across space. Like, what is that? Of course NASA didn't follow up. Like, what are they gonna say? Oh yeah, those are stars that move and blink, I think. I mean, no? Space junk. Yeah, space debris and swamps and things. Also, what a lame excuse. Space junk? Okay, so you're saying there's lots of litter up there, that's what you're saying? That's what just zipped over my house silently, defying gravity and lasered up my cow? Yeah, I don't think so, NASA. Number 3. Chris Hadfield. Retired Canadian astronaut, engineer, fighter pilot, and musician. Ladies and gentlemen, Chris Hadfield flew 2 missions and also served as commander on the International Space Station. Before his career as an astronaut, he served in the Canadian Armed Forces for 25 years as an air commander fighter pilot. So he has the credentials to say the least. In 1992, Hadfield was accepted into the Canadian astronaut program. He first flew in space in 1995, and since then, he says he's seen tons of stuff up there just zipping around that even a man with all those credentials says he can't explain. Quote, "I've seen countless things in the sky, but he has a pretty cool take on it. He doesn't keep it on the DL, he doesn't boast, and he doesn't panic. Seems like Chris has the mentality like, quote, to see something in the sky that you don't understand and then to immediately conclude it's intelligent life from another solar system is the height of foolishness and lack of logic. However, Chris seems to have a little dirt on Mars that maybe we all don't. He said, I think the fundamental question is that Mars was a lot like Earth 4 billion years ago, when life first formed. So if it happened here, did it happen there? It would be evident somewhere in the geologic records. All we need is one fossil for proof. He thinks there could be potentially alien life in the clouds of Venus or on the distant moons of one of our gas giants. Researchers have suggested that there could be microbial life in the clouds of Venus because of the presence of ammonia, which on Earth is a key indicator of aquatic life. Aquatic life, eh? Atlanteans? Hadfield on the UAP phenomenon, quote, "We have 7 people living up there. We've been sending people to space since I was born. I spent half a year off planet looking everywhere. It makes no sense at all that intelligent life somewhere from not our solar system could cross interstellar space and just sneak around and only be caught on some strange video by fighter pilots. It just doesn't pass any basic sniff test or logic. It's fun, it's exciting, but if you use reason, the whole argument falls apart." End quote. Okay, Chris Hadfield, keep your secrets for now, you polite Canadian you. Wait till people start looking into Paul Hellyer, another very polite Canadian with some secrets of his own. Until then, you keep distracting us up there with that guitar, Chris. I see you, Jake Sully. Number 2, Michael Collins. NASA veteran and the very first driver up there, Mr. Michael Collins himself served as command module pilot on the historic Apollo 11 mission in 1969. When Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin walked on the moon for the very first time, saying those very first famous lines we all know so well, Collins was back parking that thing up there. Mr. Collins stayed up there by himself in lunar orbit waiting for the safe return of his crewmates. I can't even stay in a basement with the lights off by myself. Imagine being up there just drifting in the currents of matter, like being in the middle of the ocean. Yeah, no way, dude. The astronaut retired from NASA in 1970 and spent his free time answering questions on Twitter. Apparently, he has gotten some really interesting buzz. Mr. Collins invited the interweb to chat, saying, quote, "Are we alone? Hashtag Ask Michael Collins." And boy oh boy, did he get some responses. Everything from wackos who like aliens to very, very high-ranked generals and pilots who are apparently also wackos who like aliens for talking about this. Collins, quote, "I used to think that NASA sent me to the wrong place, to the moon, because I think Mars is a much more interesting place," end quote. Collins has talked about it in the past about the possibility of alien life existing beyond Earth and doesn't shy away from discussing the topic in full. In 1999, for instance, he even argued on the topic of life developing in other parts of this infinite cosmos. So maybe it has then. He wrote in his book saying, quote, "I am alone now. Truly alone, and absolutely isolated from any known life. Although I may feel like I'm the same person, I also feel that I am different from other people. I have been places and done things you simply would not believe." Collins circled the moon once every 2 hours. What's scarier, walking on an unknown rock that apparently no one's ever visited, or flying all the way around it by yourself in the pitch black with no communications? Collins achieved the rank of Major General. He left NASA in 1970 to join the State Department and later became director of the Smithsonian National Air and Space Museum in Washington. One of the most key players in this whole thing. Michael Collins sadly passed in 2021. Number 1. Buzz Aldrin. Of course, the poster child for the whole phenomenon itself, Mr. Edwin Eugene Aldrin Jr. American astronaut, engineer, fighter pilot with a doctorate of science in astronautics. This guy is overqualified, okay? 3 spacewalks in 1966, Gemini 12 mission in 1969, Apollo 11 mission. He and mission commander Neil Armstrong were the first 2 people to land on the moon. Quote, "There was something out there, close enough to be observed. What could it be?" According to Aldrin, on Apollo 11 to the moon, quote, "I observed a light out the window that appeared to be moving alongside us." What could that have been other than a spacecraft from another country or another world? It was either the rocket that had separated from us or the 4 panels that moved away when we extracted the lander, right? After he returned from his missions, he was convinced he saw aliens while he was out there. Credentials aside, he took a lie detector test, people, which he passed with flying colors. In an interview with C-SPAN Buzz, he talked about the future potential of Earth's moon for humanity. He added a little extra info that might have gained the spark to go back, regarding a certain monolith on a moon. Quote, "Visit the moon Phobos of Mars. There's a monolith there, a very unusual structure on this little potato object that goes around Mars once in every 7 hours. When people find out about that, they're gonna say, who put that there? And you bet, Buzz, I'll be the first one to ask that."